Billionaire's last blind date revealed a hidden truth. How one single mom transformed his life. Mark Anderson stood at the enormous floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, gazing at Central Park bathed in the golden glow of a New York sunset. Billionaire. Successful. Untouchable. Yet, beneath that facade lay an unsettling emptiness that seemed to echo throughout the cavernous space of his luxurious life. He felt like a ghost drifting aimlessly through opulent galas filled with people who only cared about appearances, far removed from the warmth and laughter of true connection. Just one last blind date. Mark, his best friend, had insisted, eyes gleaming with the excitement of a hopeful match. Mark only sighed. The idea felt less like a potential romantic venture and more like a push into an unfamiliar abyss. You need someone in your life, his friend had added, oblivious to the existential crisis that churned in Mark's gut. Could anyone really shatter the icy grip of loneliness that had gripped him for far too long? As the evening approached, dread twisted in his stomach. He was to meet Sarah Bennett, a name he had almost forgotten as he frantically reviewed the paperwork for an upcoming board meeting. The clash between his multi-million-dollar empire and the humble existence of a single mother rattled in his mind like a dissonant tune. He found his mind racing. How could someone from the depths of struggle possibly align with a life carved from wealth and power? Sarah walked into the diner, and her vibrancy was instant. Her laughter filled the room, blending with the comforting sound of sizzling burgers and clattering cutlery. She smiled easily and flashed a confidence that felt almost foreign to Mark. The greasy fries and worn vinyl booths contrasted with his usual surroundings: fine china, plush seating, and sterile manners. Yet, as they settled into conversation, something shifted. He chuckled at her witty remarks. Her joy dismantled his defenses, and Mark felt the glimmer of familiarity, a hint of the man he used to be before wealth stole his laughter. With every passing moment, he was pulled deeper into her stories of resilience. Sarah's eyes shone as she shared tales of her son, Tommy, who dreamt of stars and space. The joy of motherhood seeped into her words, and soon Mark was listening not just to her aspirations, but to the struggle coursing through them. Bills and debts became merely backdrop noise, overshadowed by her unwavering spirit and unfiltered candidness. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But just as he began to relish the thoughts of a connection, a jolt of reality struck him. Sarah's late father, a respected professor, caught in a scandal that cost him everything. The heaviness of the revelation made Mark's heart race. It was an anchor dragging him down into tumultuous waters of conscience. Was this not the same intellect crushed beneath the boot of privilege that Mark had benefited from? Suddenly, the walls of his luxurious office felt maddeningly close, suffocating him with the weight of his existence. Should he use his power to advocate for justice? Help Sarah reclaim her father's tarnished legacy? Or maintain the security of his empire at the cost of another? Tension snarled inside him, a conflict his wealth could not shield. Mark's world was rapidly narrowing, and plunged into the depths of a moral tempest that would determine not just his destiny, but the very essence of who he was as a man. The choice loomed larger, and as he locked eyes with Sarah, her unwavering hope mirrored back uncertainties he could no longer ignore. Would he have to forego his comfort, or would the price of inaction haunt him forever? Mark stood at the precipice of a decision that threatened to fracture everything he thought he knew. The gentle hum of the diner faded into a muted backdrop as he processed Sarah's revelation, each word ringing like a bell in his mind. The scandal that had marred her father's legacy stirred an unfamiliar anger within him, an anger directed not only at the injustice Sarah had faced, but at his own status as a participant in a system that allowed such things to occur unnoticed. His gaze flickered back to Sarah. She was animatedly discussing her son's obsession with planets and rocket ships, that effervescent spirit tucked within stories rooted in hardship. How had she risen from those ashes, while he had been floundering in his gilded cage? A relentless series of what-ifs engulfed him. What if he could shift his trajectory? What if advocating for Sarah could lead to something bigger than himself, a chance to use his wealth for something worthwhile? Driven by the urgency rising in his chest, Mark leaned forward, determination sharpening his voice. Tell me more about your father's situation. I can't just sit back and let this go unnoticed. His confession felt like a fragile commitment, a seed planted in the midst of turmoil. He wasn't yet sure how he would act, but the desire to help surged like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. Sarah's expression shifted, revealing a mix of hope and skepticism. It's a complex story, Mark. There are forces at play that are much bigger than both of us. I appreciate your willingness, but he interrupted her hesitation, the desperation bubbling in his chest rising to the surface. But what? The question was thick with an edge of urgency. You've faced this alone for too long. Let us figure out a way to navigate it together. His words felt both empowering and terrifying. It was a declaration steeped in vulnerability, an offer to share not just the burden of her past, but also the prospect of forging a new path forward. The electric connection between them was palpable, the air thrumming with a new tension woven from purpose and empathy. Yet, lurking in the corners of Mark's mind was the nagging fear of what this entailed: sacrifice, scrutiny, and the possibility of rejecting the structured comforts he had clung to for so long. Are you ready to face that kind of scrutiny? To shine a light where darkness has dwelled for too long? She needed reassurance. He could see it in the momentary doubt clouding her cerulean gaze. Those words spiraled in his thoughts. Scrutiny was the beast he had always avoided, not wanting the careful balance of his meticulously crafted life disrupted. Yet he felt a pull toward raw truth, a longing to tear through the veneer of his wealthy existence and confront his real self. I'm ready, he asserted, a trace of conviction releasing the tension within. Perhaps it's about time I did more than profit from my privilege. He had taken the first step toward a metamorphosis that frightened him profoundly, yet exhilarated him at the same time. As they made plans to explore this new venture together, Mark couldn't shake the image of the reviews and backlash that might follow. Would he emerge from this transformation stronger, or would he be dismantled by the chaos of revealing a broken system? With a deep breath, he dismissed the doubts that clawed at the edges of his mind. It was time to forge a new legacy, one that intertwined with Sarah's, where sacrifice could lead to profound growth. Sarah smiled, an expression equal parts gratitude and belief. As their conversation flowed anew, marking the dawn of a partnership rooted in strength and justice, Mark felt a flicker of hope. Yet, as he walked her to her car under the streetlights, a shadow crossed his thoughts. What unseen obstacles awaited them in this newly forged alliance? Would the powers that sought to obliterate her father's name extend their grasp to him as well? The night held answers that were just beyond reach, a cliffhanger of possibilities that would shape their journey ahead. What would he have to confront next to make a true difference? Mark awoke the next morning, the early sun spilling through the curtains like a reminder of the choices laid before him. It was a day unlike any other. The gravity of his new alliance weighed heavily on his shoulders. He had crossed a threshold, and the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. With a brisk morning routine that felt mechanical and distant, he dressed in tailored clothes that had once made him feel powerful, but now felt like armor against the vulnerability he was wrestling with. As he studied himself in the mirror, his reflection stared back with questions he could not yet answer. Who was he now? The man drawn into Sarah's world was vastly different from the one consumed by corporate greed and personal ambition. He poured a cup of coffee. The decision to dive deeper into Sarah's plight gripped him like a vice. With each sip, the taste of caffeine stirred his resolve. He knew that ignorance was no longer an option. He had to confront the realities that he had meticulously avoided. Mark pulled out his laptop and began his research. He scoured articles, interviews, and social media posts, piecing together the fragments of Sarah's father's downfall. The story was as chaotic as he had imagined. Political maneuvers, smear campaigns, and displaced loyalties surfaced like a grotesque tapestry. This was not just a personal battle for Sarah. It was a power struggle that had far-reaching implications. Hours passed, but instead of the dread he expected, adrenaline coursed through him. The puzzle pieces ignited a sense of purpose. He could not merely act as a financier. He needed to be a strategist. What if he mobilized allies, reached out to those in positions of influence, or utilized his connections to bring attention to Sarah's father's case. A sudden wave of realization enveloped him. He had hidden from the very talents that had thrust him into the spotlight. His ability to negotiate, to sway opinions, could be his most valuable asset. Perhaps he could orchestrate a public forum, invite representatives from various media outlets, and bring the light on his Sarah's cause. Confronting the shadows required a game plan, one he could navigate with the acumen he had honed in the corporate sphere, albeit now redirected for justice rather than profit. The phone chimed, jolting him from his thoughts. It was Sarah, asking him to meet for lunch to discuss their next steps. The mere thought of keeping up with her optimism and drive energized him. Yet, a phase of self-doubt encroached as he wondered whether he could truly support her against the formidable forces they were about to face. As he drove to the diner, Mark examined his mental landscape. Each low rumble of the engine brought forth a mix of frenetic excitement and paralyzing fear. What were the pushes and pulls pulling him toward this new path? A desire for redemption, perhaps? An awakening of purpose? It felt like he was moving towards something greater than himself. He arrived at the diner and found Sarah already seated, her demeanor radiant, yet subtly tinged with anxiety. The moment their eyes locked, an unspoken understanding passed between them, as if the universe had conspired to place them on this precipice together. "Mark," she began, her voice steady yet soft, "how do you feel about taking the first step? We can present this both personally and publicly, but it's going to require full transparency." Here was the moment he had anticipated yet dreaded. He could either back away into his insulated life or lean in with all that he had. This choice would define his new identity. Would he confront the very forces that had plagued their lives? "I'm all in, Sarah. Let us take this fight to them," he asserted, his voice reverberating with newfound clarity. But her challenging gaze lingered, and with it came an unsettling doubt. Could he truly navigate the labyrinth of public scrutiny and fearsome adversaries ahead? As they began mapping out their strategy, Mark felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, a weight that both terrified and thrilled him, challenging the very core of who he thought he was. Together, they were about to breach the fortress of a broken system, but the gates were fortified with peril and deception. Would they prevail in exposing the truth, or would they become entangled within those very shadows they sought to illuminate? In that moment, with Sarah's unwavering belief beside him, Mark realized one harsh truth. The deeper he ventured into this darkness, the clearer the light ahead would shine, or so he hoped. As they set to work on their plan, he couldn't shake the nagging thought, what would they uncover together, and at what cost? The answers loomed as ominous as the horizon, beckoning them forward into the unknown. As they sat across from each other, the ambience of the diner buzzed with the muffled conversations of others. Yet Mark found himself enveloped in a bubble from which nothing could penetrate. Sarah's fervent gaze was unwavering, conveying a sense of urgency. The plan they were about to forge would reshape not only Sarah's fate, but would push Mark into an uncharted realm of his own potential. "I think we should start by compiling all the evidence we can gather about what actually happened to my father," she said, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the table. "There has to be someone out there who witnessed the corruption, maybe even a whistleblower willing to step forward." Mark nodded, absorbing her words with absorbing intensity. "We need solid credibility. News organizations will want a declared source. We can't just present hearsay." However, beneath the surface of strategic planning, Mark felt a stirring anxiety. What if this was an uphill battle against an insurmountable wall? Each second that passed felt like a clock ticking towards self-doubt's crescendo. Could he truly face the antagonistic forces they were about to rally against? He would need to fully invest himself in something so much bigger than simple corporate affairs, something tightly woven with human life and dignity. Strategizing shifted to logistical planning, and the two fueled one another's ideas. Hours slipped by. The diner transformed into their makeshift war room. Together they were turning passion into palpable concepts. An idea struck Mark. What if we staged a press release? It'd be so much easier to grab attention if we have the media present. "Right," Sarah said, her excitement evident. "We could create a narrative that's bigger than just my father's story. We can challenge the system itself. We can put a name to this corruption." The embers of enthusiasm ignited something within Mark, and as they detailed their ambitions further, something began to shift in him. The once distant figure who detachedly moved through corporate ladders now felt like a captain rallying the troops, the echoes of his previous life fading, replaced by a newly emerging self. Yet, beneath the excitement lay an ever-present shadow of insecurity. What did it mean to embrace this new identity? In every meeting with Sarah, he felt her tenacity seeping into him. But was he genuinely capable of confronting people who carried the weight of power? The fear loomed larger as thoughts spiraled, questioning his ability to forge the necessary connections, to navigate the intricate dances of influence and leverage that plague those in the upper echelons. As the discussion reached its first crescendo, Mark's phone buzzed. A message blinked from his social media account, an exclusive interview request with a major news outlet regarding the scandal surrounding Sarah's father. His heart raced, a mixture of dread and thrill surged through him. Even as he processed the request, questions darted through his mind. Would they want him to be the figurehead, or simply a supportive shadow? And more importantly, did he have what it took to step into the light? His eyes met Sarah's, and in that instant, the stakes intensified. This was where they would make their stand, where the path of turning the tides against corruption was laid out before them. Sarah, what if we are in over our heads? What if we lose everything we have? Mark's voice trembled slightly, revealing the vulnerability that lurked behind his bravado. We are not backing down, she replied, steel in her voice. This is about more than just us. It's about truth. Mark inhaled deeply, wrestling with the intensity of their mission. A resolve began to crystallize. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. It would be fraught with challenges that could expose his deepest fears and insecurities. Yet, the thought of abandoning their cause felt unbearable. As they finalized their plans for what felt like a defining moment, Mark realized he was clinging to an unknown truth. He needed to be the man who stepped into the light. That's where transformation occurred. But would it break or build him? The hour grew late as they wrapped up their discussion, the diner growing quieter with each passing minute. Just as they prepared to leave, Mark's phone chimed again. Another alert. The sense of urgency heightened within him as he glanced at the screen, a stark realization creeping in. Someone had taken notice, and not everyone would welcome their voices with open arms. Would they be ready to confront the forces ready to silence them? As they walked out together, he could feel the fabric of their decisions shifting underfoot. Would they stand solid against the unraveling world ahead, or would they become the very victims they were fighting against? Mark stepped out of the diner, the cold air rushing over him like a bucket of ice water, clearing his mind temporarily of the spiraling doubts that had filled it only moments before. The streets, dimly lit under flickering neon signs, seemed to hold a darker potential, an underground current of secrecy and resistance. As he walked beside Sarah, purpose interwove with a burgeoning dread. They didn't just write a plan. They drafted a manifesto, a call to arms against the entrenched forces of corruption that lurked in the shadows of a polished industry. Their first definitive step took form, a press release crafted meticulously to expose the rot within the corporation that had wronged Sarah's father. But with it came the reality of their exposure, the attention magnetizing both allies and threats. Would he be the one in front of the cameras? The idea twisted Mark's stomach. He had spent years as a supporting player in his own life, following scripts written by others. Yet now, the ink of someone else's story pressed firmly against his shoulders. Mark, I know this sounds a bit crazy, but if we can amplify the noise, we can force them to respond, Sarah said, her breath forming small clouds in the chill. Yet Mark could read between the lines. The real challenge lay beyond just gathering evidence. It was the fight against apathy and indifference, the push against a monstrous machine fueled by fear. Amplify. Right. Just how do we do that? He fidgeted with his jacket collar, the fabric not only shielding him from the cold, but serving as an impromptu armor, warding off the specter of doubt. We need support, people who believe in something more than just a paycheck. Then let us find them. You and we begin our own network of whistleblowers. We'll show them they're not alone, she replied, her voice unwavering. In her calm, he found an echo of his own ambition rekindling. Perhaps he was entering a battlefield, a vast expanse filled with treachery and double crosses. If he'd be breaking barriers, he needed some allies and not just bodies to fill the space. The next few days morphed into a frenzied whirlwind of outreach. They reached out to old contacts from Mark's corporate days, rekindling connections once thought extinguished. Emails flew across screens. Phone calls filled the air with anticipatory tension, and every connection they made left Mark with a knot in his stomach, both from hope and worry. Each name on their list offered potential, but also introduced risks. He found himself engaging with people he had avoided at social gatherings, relying on their past rapport as a foundation to rekindle interest in a cause that was far greater than mere personal gain. That in the corners of conference rooms and over the hum of coffee machines, whispers about a potential expose began surfacing. A small flurry of confidence swelled in Mark as he brushed against the edges of his latent capability, yet his integrity wrestled against the fear of anonymity eroding into fame. During one particularly tense meeting, an unexpected ally emerged, a young intern named Jamie, who had worked briefly with Sarah's father. Jamie possessed a raw fearlessness that invigorated Mark. "I never met your dad, Sarah, but I know his fight comes with risks. I want to help, but I have to know how much you're willing to put at stake." This could blow wide open. Mark's heart raced, caught in the scuffle of excitement and fear. This kid saw the stakes clearly, framing the situation in stark terms. What if they uncovered information that threw them into the crosshairs of a powerful corporate adversary? Would Sarah and he remain steadfast? Could he accept the mantle of leadership that came with such peril? With newfound clarity, he resolved to push through. They needed to be bold, even if it meant running headfirst into the lion's den. But as they forged ahead, a persistent question echoed in his mind. Could he truly stand firm amidst the chaos, or would the gravity of their endeavor send him spiraling back into obscurity? Time was ticking, and with each day, the tension mounted. They were transforming their ideals into actionable strategies, yet the still lingering threat loomed over their shoulders. Just as they began to sketch the layout of a public gala designed to attract media attention, another alert flashed on Mark's phone. A news article had just been published that hinted at the dark underbelly of the industry they sought to expose. Would it incite the insurers of the status quo to strike back or usher their efforts into the limelight? The journey to truth was becoming fraught with complexities, and as they plotted their next steps, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something monumental. The ultimate test would come soon. Would they fold or rally against the burgeoning storm that was about to break? The next morning brought an anxious tension that buzzed through Mark's bones. He flipped his phone in his hand, unable to let go of the uncertainty that gripped him since the article had surfaced. Each notification felt more like a taunt than a connection, each ping stirring his anxiety like a stirred pot spilling over. His morning coffee did little to warm the chill snake coiling in his stomach. As he and Sarah huddled over their laptops, preparing to formulate a robust counter-strategy, Mark felt a flicker of doubt clawing back to life. "What if they make an example of us?" he murmured. "What if we're not ready for this?" He could feel the weight of countless what-ifs bearing down on him. "We can't think like that," Sarah snapped, pulling her focus away from the screen to meet his gaze. "That's exactly what they want us to do, second-guess ourselves until we give up. We've got the evidence. We can't lose sight of why we started this." He knew she was right, yet his mind wrestled against her conviction. The daring edge of their mission began to feel more like a precipice. He inhaled sharply and shifted his posture, confronting the clash inside him. "Let us seize the momentum. We have this opportunity to connect with more whistleblowers. Let us get some real voices on our team, people who understand the stakes involved," he suggested, uncertainty flickering but determination starting to take root. The day unfolded into a parade of meetings, calls, and strategic discussions. Jamie proved invaluable, his raw passion motivating Mark in ways he hadn't anticipated. The trio brainstormed tactics, assembling a growing list containing names of individuals willing to speak out, quiet giants who had hidden their experiences under the weight of fear and conformity. Yet even as they gathered momentum, Mark sensed the specter of corporate retaliation. Each person who agreed to join risked everything. The weight of accountability pressed on him, igniting a fierce resolve. This wasn't merely about Sarah's father anymore. It was about the silenced, the hidden, and perhaps even a reckoning of his own complacency. Suddenly, Mark found himself drawn into a scuffle during a meeting echoing with skepticism and nerves when they presented their plans to a small group gathered at Jamie's suggestion, a mix of disgruntled ex-employees and a journalist willing to investigate further. "You're sure you want to push this forward? With the heat coming down, your names could be next on the list if things blow up." One concerned former employee cautioned. Mark's heart thudded as he felt the gravity of these warnings. Every face in the room reflected trepidation, mirroring his own internal conflict. He opened his mouth to respond, but hesitated as the weight of their collective fear filled the void. "No one is forcing you into this. You all have the power to walk away," he finally said, each word measured but edged with his own fear. "But I'm asking you not to, because if we don't fight for what's right, we will remain stuck in darkness. We have a chance to expose the truth, but it requires courage." The last word solidified his own resolve, igniting something within him that hesitated until that moment that a silence fell across the room, stretching like a taut wire, before Jamie spoke up, boldly. "We all want to see the truth come out. We just need to know you'll stand by us. If we rally together, we can make it through. Together." Their steadfastness fueled Mark's determination. He recognized it in the eyes of each person present, mere echoes of his own awakening. "Then let us set the timeline. We'll go public next week." They spent the following days assembling everything, every moment of collaboration, igniting collaborative strength and bonding sessions that built trust. Yet as the deadline loomed closer, so did the specter of an inevitable confrontation. Mark tried to manage his fears, reminding himself that every action redefined their collective narrative, leading him toward a truth he once feared to confront. As the components began to fall into place, something unsettling happened. Sarah received a call, her face paling visibly as she clutched the phone tight. Mark's heart raced, both with dread and anticipation. The words on her lips might change everything they had committed to. He braced himself, ready to face whatever news awaited, knowing they were teetering on the edge of perilous consequences. "Mark," she began softly, "I think we've been watched. Someone just leaked our plans." A deep breath coiled in the silence, and Mark felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. This wasn't just an inner conflict anymore. It was quickly becoming a test of survival against forces they could scarcely comprehend. Would they withstand the mounting pressure, or would the storm finally strip away their resolve? Mark's breath caught in his throat as Sarah's words hung heavily in the air between them. The fragile threads of their carefully woven strategy now felt as thin as gossamer. It was one thing to prepare for the backlash, but quite another to face its sinister reality. He could feel dread unfurling in his mind, each thought darkening with implications. "Do we know who leaked it?" he asked, struggling to maintain a steadiness in his voice. A dangerous cocktail of fear and anger brewed within him. The stakes were now maddeningly high, and they had exposed themselves to the merciless scrutiny of those willing to protect the corrupt. Sarah shook her head, her mouth a thin line of frustration. "No idea, but someone is watching us. We need to assess our next steps carefully." The light in her eyes dimmed, her confidence waffled slightly, an eerie contrast to the vigor she'd displayed earlier. Yet Mark sensed a fire burning beneath her concern, a reminder of the commitment they had made. "All right," he replied, his mind racing with formulations of plans, countermeasures, and potential allies. "Let us reach out to those we've contacted. Inform them about the breach without revealing anything sensitive." The two dove into action, the urgency propelling them forward. They composed messages that carefully articulated their need for discretion, hoping to stave off fear within their network. Each reply felt like a lifeline, but an overwhelming sense of vulnerability snaked through Mark's consciousness, amplifying his anxiety. As they worked, he found himself grappling with the monumental weight that now settled squarely on his shoulders. What had begun as a passionate pursuit for justice now felt perilously close to recklessness. He understood the moral imperative of unveiling the truth, yet the fear of unwittingly dragging others into danger gnawed at him. Days passed in a whirlwind of frantic phone calls and scrappy meetings. In quiet moments, Mark caught glimpses of resolve in Sarah's eyes, but the tension between them thickened. Every shared silence deepened the fracture between their ideals and the harsh truths they faced. One evening, As they reconvened in their hastily assembled war room, a cramped conference room littered with papers, Mark threw down the pen he had been twirling. This feels like drawing a bullseye on our backs. Maybe we need to reconsider the timing, he said, the tightness in his voice revealing his inner turmoil. Sarah's brow furrowed as she considered his words. What are you suggesting? That we pull back? The people we gathered need us to push this forward. The weight of every word lingered as Mark's internal conflict intensified. It's not about pulling back, Sarah. It's about being strategic. We can regroup, find more evidence, strengthen our defenses, but we've already come so far. She interrupted, frustration prickling her tone. You don't understand. This is about more than just us now. This is about holding our ground, drawing the line against them. Her passion rekindled, illuminating their cause. Mark felt the sharpness of her conviction prickling his own doubts, but recognized a buried sense of desperation. I get that, but I need to be sure that we are not on the verge of being annihilated. Do we have the strength to withstand that kind of scrutiny? Another wave of silence filled the room, thick with an uncertain atmosphere as they faced off, crossing the fine line between passion and fear. It dawned upon him the need wasn't just for external validation or angry retorts. It was also about understanding himself, about revealing the depths of his capability under pressure. With a newfound clarity, he met her fierce gaze with steady resolve. Let us gather every last piece of evidence before we go public. We'll strengthen our position. This fight isn't just for truth, it's also for our survival. Sarah's expression softened, yet determination flared in her eyes again, reflecting his own mirrored resolve. They had gained some clarity, but the real question loomed large. Would their strategic recalibration give them the advantage or leave them too vulnerable to launch their campaign in the face of retaliation? As they planned their next move, a pulse of anxiety coursed through Mark, a harbinger of imminent confrontation. The moment had arrived for them to decide. Would they stand firmly against the impending darkness, or would they begin to crumble beneath the weight of their fears? Before the ink on their plans could dry, another notification interrupted them. Eyes widening, Mark glanced towards the screen as his heart plummeted. Whatever he was about to read could change everything once again. Mark's heart raced as he opened the notification, scanning the words that seemed to shimmer and mock him from the glowing screen. A whistleblower has come forward. Details will be released later today. The implications were staggering. If someone had willingly stepped into the fray, it could either bolster their cause or obliterate everything they had worked for in an instant. What does this mean? Sarah whispered, as though afraid the words themselves might summon horrors. It means we need to act fast and decisively, Mark replied, the urgency of his tone punctuating the gravity of the situation. He gripped the edge of the table, feeling its solidness beneath his fingers, as if it could anchor him amid the swirling tempest of uncertainty. If this whistleblower is credible, we could use their information to solidify our case, but if they are targeted, it could blow back on us. What if they're leading us into a trap? Sarah's voice had transformed. It was no longer laced with fierce determination, but tinged with the palpable weight of fear. What if it's a distraction? Exactly why we must be careful, he said, his mind racing to connect dots that felt like they were constantly moving. But it could also mean we aren't alone anymore. Someone else is ready to put their neck out. As they strategized over the unexpected development, Mark wrestled with gnawing doubts about his own capabilities. This was no longer just about gathering evidence. It was about orchestrating an escape route, a means of self-preservation amid a storm that was closing in. He recalled moments from his past. The easy camaraderie he once shared with friends during casual hangouts had now transformed into the pressure of leadership, where friendships were fraught with risks. We have to vet this person, he asserted, his voice sonorous with resolve. We need to know if they truly share our goals. Do you really trust anyone right now? Sarah replied, her brow tightly knitted. The desperation in her eyes mirrored his own fears, an acknowledgement of how thin the threads of trust had become in a world filled with manipulation. Not fully, but we don't have the luxury of not taking risks. We cannot methodically parse through decisions when everything is at stake. Mark's pulse pounded in his ears. The urgency of the moment brought clarity to his thoughts, forcing a reckoning between fear and action. The next few hours cascaded into a frenetic blur of phone calls and messages, piecing together fragments of information surrounding the whistleblower. Mark felt as if he were on the cusp of unlocking his own potential, emerging from the shadow of doubt haunting him. Yet, the closer they got to uncovering the truth, the heavier the stakes felt, hammering at his resolve. "Dinner tonight," Sarah said suddenly, her eyes widening with recognition. "This whistleblower is supposed to meet with someone. We could turn it into an opportunity." The thrill of possibility ignited Mark's spirit, though a flicker of trepidation lingered. A public meeting? What if they are working with others? What if we get ambushed? Then we will adapt. We've done our best to plan so far, and this could open doors we never thought existed, Sarah countered. There was a renewed glimmer of passion in her voice, a stark reminder of why they kept pushing despite the imminent threat. He recognized the shift within himself, the faint pulse of confidence whispering to him that he was more capable than he had believed. "Let us put this into motion," he said, determination mixing with the anxiety still settling in his gut. "We'll show up prepared, every angle covered. This isn't just for us anymore. It's for the whole movement." That night, he struggled to sleep, mind whirring with thoughts of courage and risk. As morning light broke, illuminating his resolve, he knew they were on the precipice of a major decision. They would confront the unknown head-on. But as he prepared for the meeting, another notification pinged on his phone, an alert that cracked the fragile facade he had built during the night. A new power player had entered the arena, and their extensive resources could shift everything once more. As the day unfurled, Mark felt the dense air of uncertainty wrap around him like a suffocating shroud. He could sense the moment's gravity precipitating the need for exponential focus. Each notification was no longer just a message, but a potential crumbling of the world he fought to protect. In the hours leading up to their meeting, Mark paced his small apartment, muscles coiling with anxious energy. He rehearsed every possible scenario, fully aware that one misstep could lead to catastrophe. A flutter of doubt settled in his stomach. Could he truly navigate this labyrinthine situation without losing everything? His reflection in the mirror confronted him with grim honesty. He had always prided himself on being a decisive leader. Failure had never been an option. He carried too many stakes on his shoulders. Yet, the challenge of confronting this new power player clawed at his mind, revealing his own vulnerabilities. Was he merely a pawn in a larger game, an actor on a stage he didn't even fully understand? Sarah's voice echoing in his mind, "Do you really trust anyone right now?" stung fiercely, raising questions about his leadership. He had built a foundation of trust with those around him, yet the shaking ground of this current tempest made him question how solid that foundation truly was. He snapped out of the hazy self-doubt and turned to strategy. Gathering his notes, he flipped through the information they had painstakingly collated, hunting for any thread that could unify their fractured approach. The prospect of the whistleblower becoming an ally simmered alive in his thoughts, but the fear of betrayal gnawed insistently. Dinner, the critical juncture where their fates could collide with themes of betrayal or alliance, loomed large. In this volatile climate, Mark had to ensure he and Sarah approached it with calculated caution. They would not thrive on hope alone. Driving to the venue with Sarah, he scanned the cityscape, piecing together how vulnerable they were. The frenetic energy of urban life combined with the silent ticking of urgency brought a stark contrast to his thoughts. Each turn in the road mirrored the twists in his mind, where confidence battled fear. "Mark," Sarah broke the silence, her tone pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. "What if we have it all wrong? What if this whistleblower isn't a friend?" He turned to her, seeing the uncertainty etched on her face reflected back within him. "Then we adapt, just like we always have. The goal is to stay ahead, to anticipate. That is how we survive." He felt their collective fate pulsating in their shared silence, grounding him amid the uncertainty. Arriving, the evening held a chill that reached beyond the weather. They found themselves seated at a discreet table, tension humming like static in the air. The minutes pressed into hours, and the meeting loomed like a specter. Then, just as doubt threatened to overwhelm them, a figure emerged, a shadow stepping with calculated confidence that Mark's breath hitched. This was at the moment that could shift the balance from precarious to powerful. He could feel the electricity that charged the room as the potential for revelation flickered. He observed the stranger's demeanor, reading cues that spoke of hidden depths and obfuscation. Engaged in conversation, it was not merely about information exchange. It was a psychological duel, one that Mark could feel weighing heavy on his shoulders. Every word laced with implication, every glance something more than surface level. But then came a wave of revelation. The figure mentioned the new power player threatening to dismantle their efforts. With each revelation, Mark grappled with his own resolve. Could he truly navigate this unseen war, allowing a stranger's words to tilt their fates? The question loomed larger than he'd ever anticipated. Tech-savvy yet unpolished, he found he could tap into instinctual strategy that resided deep within him, a hidden competency he had long forgotten. As the conversation evolved, an unexpected truth struck with the intensity of lightning. It wasn't only about bucking the system. It was about taking charge of one's own narrative. Potential lay not just in alliances formed, but in decisions made. But just as the air began to clarify, a sudden shattering sound broke the moment. Chairs overturned, and startled faces turned. It became clear. The stakes had risen, and this confrontation would force Mark to face not just risks from the outside, but the inner chaos threatening to sink him. With every intention to exit strategically, a single thought struck him: was he prepared to confront not just external forces, but the darker heritages of his own fears? It was now or never as the meeting spiraled into chaos. The chaos erupted around him like a tidal wave, chairs scraping against the floor and muffled gasps that filled the air. Mark's heart pounded fiercely in his chest, and for the briefest moment, he felt the world slipping away, the safety of his old life calling seductively back to him. But as he stood there, trembling amidst the pandemonium, something fundamental shifted within him. This was the moment. He realized his defining stand against the shadows that had loomed too long over both Sarah and himself. With a surge of determination, he grasped Sarah's arm, pulling her close. The danger breathed life into his instincts, igniting a flame of resolve within him he had long ignored. "We have to go," he murmured, urgency lacing his voice. "But not before we gather what we need." The fear of losing everything faded as he honed in on purpose. This was not merely a confrontation. It was an opportunity, a pivotal chance to lay the groundwork for future victories. Mark maneuvered through the fray, leading Sarah toward the back exit, all the while scanning the room for any potential threats or allies. If this new power player had sent their thugs to disrupt their meeting, he and Sarah needed to emerge not just unscathed but emboldened. He could no longer be a player who sat comfortably at the edges. He would be the catalyst for engagement, the spearhead against the forces he had once ignored. As they emerged from the building into the blaring streetlights, Sarah's breathing steadied alongside his own. "What now?" she asked, her eyes shining with an electrifying mix of fear and excitement. "Now we go public." Mark spoke with newfound urgency. "We harness this chaos. We expose their uncouth strategies and leverage this moment for transparency. If they want to fight, we will give them one." The weight of responsibility felt daunting, but this was a far cry from the passive life he had once led. He was no longer merely a businessman, but an advocate, a protector. In the days that followed, Mark engaged in an endless stream of late-night strategy meetings and intense discussions with Sarah and their growing network of whistleblowers. The revelation of the new power player had turned the tides. Public sentiment was ripe for their cause. Together, they crafted a detailed expose that would shine a spotlight on misconduct, using everything they had unearthed as both shield and sword. Mark felt the bygone bonds of his corporate life dissipate, replaced by the profound connections forged with passionate crusaders for justice. Though lingering apprehension haunted his thoughts at times, insecurities about leadership transformed into a rich tapestry of purpose. For the first time, he experienced a sense of belonging crafted out of shared ideals, a community unified against corruption. As the announcements went live, the world watched. The buzz around their cause began to proliferate, igniting conversations everywhere. Mark could hear murmurs of hope blossom in public forums, amplifying their call for justice. He had confronted not just corporate giants, but his own self-doubt, proving to himself that he was more than the sum of his past failures. He was an agent of change. The impact was immediate and profound. With every interview, every news story published, and every soul inspired to add their voice, Mark's resolve crystallized. Where once he had felt like an outlier in both the corporate machine and the very human struggle of navigating principles, he had found a rare acceptance of his place in the world as he stood at the forefront of real transformation. Sarah's unwavering support reaffirmed the potency of their alliance, and in turns, each facing moment of vulnerability fueled their growth. News outlets began covering their endeavors, and soon, influential advocates reached out, brought to them not merely by the raw emotion of their mission, but the undeniable truth tied deeply within. This trajectory forged into an enviable spotlight proved true. They were not alone anymore. Days turned into weeks, the once dissonant pieces transforming into synchronicity. Mark began organizing town halls, inviting those displaced by corporate greed to share their narratives. Each encounter revived his spirit further. The contrast between his old life, one of solitary glory, and his new existence, an invitation of collaboration and community, was stark. He was no longer navigating the world merely as a billionaire. He had evolved into a leader. Recognition flooded in from various corners. Academic institutions began reaching out for partnerships, seeking to study the unique turning points they had unveiled through their determined pursuit of accountability. After years adrift in extravagance, Mark no longer felt like a ghost among the glitz. He had become a beacon of hope in the tumultuous storm. The final challenge emerged as Mark stood before a captivated audience at a press conference. Cameras flashed, eager reporters leaned in, and the potential for change resonated vibrantly in the air. He took a deep breath, the finality of his commitment carving a spot for profound transformation. How far he had come to be a voice against silence rather than a mere player in a game built on privilege. This journey reminded me that real wealth lies not in our assets, but in the integrity of our actions, he declared passionately. Locking eyes with Sarah in the crowd as the applause thundered around him, Mark found himself enveloped in gratitude. Heart swelling. He realized he had conquered not just an external conflict, but the indifference hidden within him. His courage had flourished precisely where once stood hesitance. This was a moment of self-actualization. Now, he was ready to embrace all the challenges that lay ahead, unafraid of the scrutiny that would invariably come. He had stepped fully into the light, where darkness could no longer cast its shadow. Mark had achieved something profound, building an authentic legacy entwined with purpose. He felt a solid confidence, his competence now recognized and his position established not just within the walls once laden with opulence, but in the hearts and minds of people daring to dream against injustice. The echoes of his journey resonated far beyond the confines of his own life, shaping new endeavors, adventures yet unknown. As he turned away from the podium, he embraced Sarah, her smile a testament to their shared victories. Together, they had conquered fear, united in purpose, and achieved real change. Amid the flashing cameras and hopeful murmurs, Mark felt his spirit finally align with the man he had always aspired to be, and the future felt infinitely brighter. This is the perfect opportunity for you to engage with this powerful story. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It really makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.